Good evening. Welcome to the Automated Home Show. I just got done talking to David Webster, smart home expert, again, and this time we're talking about smart lighting. David has a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, and I think whether you're a complete newbie or you're intermediate or even if you're advanced, I think you're going to get something out of this conversation because David, as a qualified electrical engineer and with many, many years of smart home experience, he is extremely knowledgeable. Whereas myself, as a relative newbie, I'm asking some newbie type questions. So I think there's something in this conversation for everybody. So I'm going to throw it to the conversation right now and I'll talk to you on the other side. All right, David, how are you? Nice to talk to you again.
I'm good, thanks, Marty. Yes, it's very cold here, so not enjoying that.
Oh, yeah? What temperature is it at the moment?
As I speak, it's 2 degrees.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I guess you're dreaming of those, holiday Caribbean trips.
Yeah, yeah, that was far more pleasant.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Well, it's been a bit of a madhouse situation here today with the baby. In fact, mummy and baby have just gone for a walk out the door. So apologies in advance if they burst through the door and we've got a bit of background
Yep,
noise, but we'll do our
sure.
best here. Yeah. Before we get into smart home conversation, anything else going
Yeah.
on? Anything interesting?
Uh not no. Yeah.
Okay.
Other than the Alexa event that's coming up in a week or so, the Amazon scheduled new product meeting announcements.
I think I missed that. What is that about?
I think it's on the 26th. They're being very tight-lipped, but it's an Amazon press day when they're talking about new things related to Alexa. So it's
Oh,
widely speculated that it will be the soft launch of Alexa AI.
okay. Well, look, maybe that's a topic for another conversation. You know what? How about we don't speculate? How about let's wait and see, and we can talk about that in the future. But that's something I've been wondering about. So yeah, I guess we'll wait and see. Something
Okay.
interesting before we jump into it.
Yes.
I just finished watching. Well, we just finished watching the O.J. Simpson 4 episode miniseries on Netflix. I don't know if it's available worldwide or not, but oh my God, what a monster that guy was. Very interesting show, but yeah, terrifying as well.
Oh, okay. I'm not aware of that one, so yeah, I might check that one out.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so to set the scene for anybody that's going to be watching or listening to this one, David is a smart home expert, many, many years working with smart home tech products. I'm much more of a newbie. I'm going to put on the newbie amateur hat and I'm going to ask some silly questions, which will be very easy for me today because I'm tired. And when I'm tired, it's I don't have to pretend to be not very intelligent. So um, and one more actually item that I want to cover is apologies to anybody watching about the really, really bad audio previous conversations we've had. It was out of sync. It was so painful to go and listen to and watch. Real quick, I don't know why the audio was out of sync. It was my fault. We were using some different software. Anyway, today we're recording with Zoom, so hopefully this one goes smoothly. But David, why don't you tell us broad strokes? What are we going to be talking about today, and who should be listening, and what can we expect to learn?
Okay. Well, the idea is to talk about smart lighting. As you know, I contribute quite a lot to various smart home forums, and it's a topic that crops up time and time again. And I thought we might spend some time talking about what is smart lighting and the different ways of implementing it. So, smart switches versus smart bulbs is the starting point for that. And we'll talk about some of the technical considerations that you need to take into account when making a choice and installing those things. So we won't go too deep, I don't think, but you never know. We might disappear down a rabbit hole. So
Well, look, you did send me over a few cliff notes of some things that you wanted to talk about,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you kind of lost me. So I'm going to be watching and listening with interest. I do actually have a pen and paper right here. So if you see me jotting
Oh,
things
okay.
down, it's because I'm,
Yeah.
I'm a student here. I'm looking to learn. But I
Okay.
also recall, David, from our very first conversation, you mentioned in that conversation that your favorite things about a smart home were smart lighting and
Yeah,
smart curtains. Now, I don't yet
yeah.
have any smart curtains. That's probably a plan for for this year. But I have already done a few things with smart lighting, and I've got to say, so far, I agree with you, and I can see why you like it so much.
It's one of those technologies that once you've lived with it, it's difficult to imagine not having it. Um, and just as an aside there, I don't regard smart curtains and smart lighting as two different topics. They are actually the same thing. If you want to think of it in these terms, smart lighting is about controlling electric light for sure, artificial lighting. Curtains is about controlling natural light, and they're both light. So they actually mesh together really well. And yeah, it's not immediately obvious, but it becomes so. I know we talked about things like simulated occupancy a couple of times, and the two are central to that. Having lights go on and off and curtains open and close while you're away to simulate occupancy is really quite important. So yeah, I think smart lighting. Let's start there. The usual way that people get into it, and I have observed this with supporting Alexa-based systems, is that people buy a few Wi-Fi smart bulbs because they can be color changing as well as voice control, and that's great. But it's an introduction, and I think people confuse smart lighting with remote controlled lighting. Voice controlled lighting is no more than remote control. It's instead of going to a switch and pressing it, you use your voice. Automation is having the lights do things that they're supposed to do without you having to think about it, without doing voice control. Personally, I can't think of anything worse than going into a room and having to say, Alexa lights on. It's just nonsense. I want them to do it on their own, and when I forget to turn them off, to turn off as well. But you've got to start somewhere. So Wi-Fi smart bulbs are the starting point, I think. But the problem with Wi-Fi smart bulbs is it's kind of a dead end in as much as if you do want to automate it, you start needing some kind of occupancy sensors or motion sensors, and the two are slightly different. We can talk about that in a minute, perhaps. But the technology doesn't exist for Wi-Fi battery-powered sensors because it's too power hungry for battery-driven devices. So most of the ones that are out there use a low power technology, so Zigbee, Thread, or what have you. And then you've got the challenge of, well, I've got a Zigbee sensor. How do I talk to a Wi-Fi bulb and make it operate? And that's a challenge. And the answer, of course, is you need some kind of smart hub. And you and I both know things like Homey Pro and other things. Amazon doesn't do a great job of that, but it can be persuaded. But the irritating thing is that people buy Wi-Fi bulbs thinking that they've been clever because they don't have to have a hub. And then when they want to take it to the next stage, it's, oh, I need a hub. And so that's a bit of a dead end. So I'm not a great fan of Wi-Fi smart bulbs.
All right.
But
Okay. So just to understand this correctly, I do have some Wi-Fi smart bulbs in our home here. I've also got some Zigbee smart bulbs here. And just to recap what you mentioned, you said if you don't have a smart home hub, something like a Homey Pro, then all you can really hope to do with a Wi-Fi smart bulb is use like voice commands to turn them on and off. And then, okay, it's still control, but you can't really do any automation.
you can do schedules, so they come on at a certain time, go off at a certain time, and then that's a step forward, of course. But you can't do the more advanced automations where they respond to people coming and going.
Yeah. Okay.
So that is a little bit of a problem with starting up Wi-Fi smart bulbs. But before you get to that stage, you need to consider whether your smart lighting is going to be using smart switches or smart dimmers to replace existing wall switches, because, as I'm sure you've discovered, if you just replace a ceiling light with a Wi-Fi bulb, somebody's going to come along and turn the power off, and suddenly it's all it's finished.
It happened. It happened yesterday. We went outside where that's we've got some ZB light bulbs outside, and we've got a car, a motion sensor. We went outside. I'm like, the lights on, and my wife said, "Oh, I think I turned the switch off." I'm like, "Why would you do that? We've had these smart lights out here for months, you know." And she's like, "Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
tired." So sure enough, I turned the switch back on. I'm like, "Oh, yep, there we go. Everything's good."
yeah. Well, it's kind of a lifetime of ingrained flipping a switch, isn't it? You know, you do it subconsciously after a while. So that's a real problem. And there are quite a lot of pros and cons between the two, but let's touch on some of those. A smart switch, or better yet, a smart dimmer. My preference is always smart dimming rather than smart switching, mainly because I quite like the fade on and fade off rather than a hard snap. And there's just basically more automation possibilities. But anyway, those devices, when you install them in the wall, work with dumb dimmable bulbs. And not all LED bulbs are dimmable, by the way, as I'm sure you've figured out. But you can use a lot of cheap, low-cost dumb LED bulbs with one smart switch, and that's an economy. So that's all good. But you lose some of the advantages of what smart lighting can potentially offer you. And I'm a great fan of circadian lighting or natural lighting, whereby the color temperature of the lights varies according to the time of day. And the idea is to reinforce the body clock rhythm by reflecting warm light in the morning and the evening, which is what sun shifts to a warmer color temperature, and a cool temperature at the midday. And that's really quite nice. I actually think that's the greatest advance in electric lighting for 100 years. It's just that people haven't literally woken up to it yet. So, yeah. So you can't do that with a smart dimmer or smart switch. The dumb bulb color temperature is what it is. Now, actually, having said that, there is a workaround. Have you come across LED bulbs that do actually have a different color temperature depending on their brightness? Philips have made a whole range of them. At one time, they were called dim tone, and now they're called warm glow. And basically, as you dim them down, they shift to a warmer color temperature. So you can kind of cheat using that kind of lighting, even if you've just got a dimmer. But a switch won't benefit that. It's full or nothing. So the biggest advantage, I guess, of doing something in the wall is that it completely solves the problem that we've just talked about. You've retained manual control, and if people do turn it on and off, the automation will still work. So that's good. But there are practical problems with installing smart switches or smart dimmers, and that is the physical space in the wall. I don't know what the back boxes are like where you are, Marty, but in the UK, they're typically quite shallow in UK homes, and that means it's a really tight fit.
I actually don't know. So kind of funny story. From time to time, we have something happen around the home, and we'll have to get some handyman, serviceman to come and help out. Usually, they don't want to speak English, even if they can speak English. So it's kind of like I'm trying to have a conversation through my wife, and it was an electrician was here once, and I was asking him about doing this, and I think the translation was basically no, don't do it. So I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are electrical considerations, and it is to do with the availability of a neutral wire in the switchback box. But in the UK, the back boxes are usually very shallow, 25 millimeters, something of that sort, is not uncommon. And not having neutral is very common. Having a neutral is the exception rather than the rule. I'm fortunate enough, my house does have neutrals at all of the switchback boxes. And that's a great plus, because you have to choose a smart switch or a smart dimmer that is either one that uses neutral or is a no neutral type. And there are some definite advantages to using ones that have got a neutral. And that could be why your electrician gets exercised about it, because he knows that it might need a neutral and there's not going to be one. And it's easy to say, oh, well, I'll just put a neutral in. Well, that could involve massive amounts of rewiring, and people aren't really prepared to do that. So maybe that's what he's concerned about. But sorry, go on. Yeah.
No, I was just going to ask. So, at what point, if somebody's considering getting into smart lighting for their home, at what point should they ask themselves the question, should I just do the smart bulb or should I be thinking about some kind of wall solution?
Yes, I think you have to decide what kind of lighting you want in the first instance. And we've touched on the fact that smart bulbs can give you circadian lighting, natural lighting, and of course, color changing. If you go for a wall solution with dumb bulbs, you lose both of those possibilities. All you've got is white light, and there's no possibility of color. So personally, I'm not a great fan of using color bulbs in ceiling fittings, mainly because they don't actually give a very good light for normal everyday use. But having color in things like table lamps and other accent lighting is much more effective to my way of thinking. So you have to decide whether you really want color in the ceiling or not. And if you don't, then you can go either route, because as you probably know, you can get white only smart bulbs. Most of the Wi-Fi ones which come out of China are always color because that's what sells, even though people don't necessarily ever use the color.
I enjoy it. I enjoy it. So one of my favorite use cases of the Wi-Fi Chinese color smart bulbs is when my wife is in the kitchen and she's, washing the dishes or something. I like to just quietly change the color to red or to purple or to blue, and I get the disapproving look glaring across at me, and I'm sitting on the couch like, oh yeah, I'm just changing the light color just for fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The other ones that I have, the other smart bulbs that we have here are Zigbee bulbs, and they you can't change the color. That's just you can change the brightness. And did you know for those Akara T1 lights, can you change the temperature? I think you can change the temperature as well, right?
I'm not familiar with those actually, so no, I don't know. But it's quite possible. I mean, I'm more familiar with Hue, and they do white only, which is fixed color temperature, and then what they call ambience, which is variable color temperature but still white, and then there's full color. So they do the three different types, and not everybody does that. But I think the, once you've decided what kind of light you want, that really dictates what solution you're going to go for. And the next decision you have is the technology that's you're going to go for. We've already discussed. If you want smart bulbs, my recommendation is go for Zigbee or Thread or Z-Wave, but not Wi-Fi, because in the longer term that has the better options for automation and integration with other devices. But and it avoids the dependency on cloud servers, which is usually the biggest problem, because should your internet go down and you've only got voice control, you won't be able to turn the lights on or off. So yeah, that's a real no-no. Everything should be local, really. So that's another tick box for the wall mounted switch or dimmer, because of course the manual control is certain, it's actually there by design.
That's a really good
So
point. That's
yeah,
that's a great point that I actually hadn't really thought about at all previously, about the difference. One of the differences between these smart bulbs that we have here, the Wi-Fi ones, yeah, you relying on the cloud, and if the Wi-Fi goes down, you really don't have anything. Whereas the Zigbee ones, they're running local with Homey, still fine. That's good.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And having manual control is kind of rule one of smart home automation. It's got the high WAF. You familiar with that term?
The wife approval factor.
Absolutely. It is very important that there's nothing worse than over automating something and getting pushed back as a consequence with, I can't close the curtains when I want to, or open them when I want to, that kind of stuff. You
Yeah,
know, it
what's the
goes.
point, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the factors that might also sway you as to smart bulbs or smart switches is what kind of a property are you living in? Because if it's your own home, you can do what you like. But if it's a rental, you've got issues with changing things most likely. So it could turn out that smart bulbs is your only option, because you can't touch anything else. And that's a bit of an issue because you end up with the problem that we discussed earlier, and that is that the existing dumb wall switch stays there, and you need to deal with that. There are some solutions, though, as you may have found, that you can get stick-on covers that go over the top of an existing dumb switch, so little fingers can't get in there and press it. Not very aesthetically pleasing, but it is effective. Two solutions that do work is if you can use some kind of a wireless switch, so a button or multiple buttons, and you can get third-party faceplates which go over the switch, and then you can mount a wireless control over the top of it. So you still have the manual switch underneath, but you just leave it parked on. Then the wireless switch controls the lights. And as soon as you do that, you end up with the possibility of selecting more than just on off. So you could have, with a single button, press, long press, double press. I'm not a great lover of those things because they're not intuitive. For guests or visitors, they're never going to figure that out. And it doesn't come in an instruction manual on the wall. So, so it should either be automated so they don't have to think about it, or if there is manual control, because they still really prefer that. I think it's a simple press on, a simple press off, and then you have the automation take care of the subtleties. So it changes the color temperature depending on the time of day, or what other activities are going on in the space. So that's a solution. But I don't know whether you're familiar with Philips Hue, but they actually have quite a few other wireless solutions. They sell you little battery buttons and a remote as well with 4 buttons on it. But the 2 other options are a device which they call a wall switch module. And it's a really compact little battery powered Zigbee module, which hopefully you can find space in the switch back box. And it converts a dumb switch to a smart switch. So the switch no longer controls the load. It merely tells the module, send a command to go turn on or off. And I've used a few of those around the place because the aesthetics don't change. It's still the same switch as it always was, but suddenly it can do clever things. And in fact, one of the really clever things about it is that the module has 2 inputs on it. So if you've got, say, a bedroom where you've got a wall switch for the ceiling light, and you've got some bedside lights, wouldn't it be cool if you could switch those bedside lights off and on from the wall switch? Well, with this solution, you can, because you simply change the switch to a double gang type and then wire the second switch to the second input on the module. No change to the house wiring whatsoever. And now that second switch wirelessly controls the bedside lights, which is very cool.
That's amazing. And how's it connected to the bedside lights?
It's not. It's wirelessly. The bedside lights have to be smart bulbs, of course.
So that'd be like Zigbee smart bulbs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
In the case of Philips Hue, everything is Zigbee. So the link is done in the Hue bridge, which is the Zigbee hub. But I've done that in a couple of places. I've upgraded rooms that only had 1 switch and 1 lighting circuit to a double gang switch with 2 lighting circuits.
That's great. So you put one of these modules behind the switch.
Yeah. Do you know, I actually have one here. There you go.
Oh, great. Okay.
They're really tiny. See if I can find one. my desk is an Aladdin's cave of bits and pieces. This is not what I had planned, but I do happen to have it here. So,
Okay, right. And now you
and
mentioned
that's
usually the space behind the switch is usually around an inch deep or so. So is
yeah.
it?
I've been fortunate enough I can squeeze it into the ones that I've done so far, but I do have one switch at the moment, which is proving a little bit too tight. With once the wires are in there, if you've got a lot of wires for whatever reason, that does make it more difficult. The snag with these things, indeed with any wireless control, is that they're battery driven. Philips say this has got a battery life of 5 years. Well, I haven't had mine for 5 years yet, so I can't say for sure that's the case, but that would be needing replacing. My fear there is that at some point somebody will forget that there's a battery behind the switch, and when the lights don't work, they're going to have to call an electrician out. And like your electrician, he's just going to throw his hands up in horror and say, "I need to rewire the entire house," rather
Yeah,
than just change the battery, because
yeah,
he
yeah,
won't know.
yeah, exactly. Now, look, David, we do have to be honest with people that are watching and listening, and we have to mention that not everybody is an electrical engineer. When you start talking about wires, I'm like,
Oh,
nah, I'm not touching
no.
that at all. I don't want to be taking apart. Look, it looks easy, but I don't have
Yeah,
any confidence in my ability to take apart a switch to try
yeah.
and put a module behind it and then try and put it back together again. So, look, do I have to call an electrician to do something like this?
If you're really concerned about it, I would say that's always the wisest and safest option. The difficulty you may have is that unless you have recommendations from somebody that electrician knows this technology, the chances are they will not know this technology. Or
Mm.
they know it from an amateur point of view, not from a professional point of view, and won't actually offer a service. And the difficulty, of course, is that things like this little module are, I think, about £30, something of that sort. Get an electrician out to spend an hour or two, you'll have spent double or triple that price on his time. So it's a difficulty.
Mm.
However, there is a non-wiring change solution. As I said, if you just use wireless controls and mount them on third-party plates, you don't touch anything behind it at all.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Something to think about. Look, just a real quick side note here. This Philips module that you can put behind the switch.
Yeah.
Let's say I don't have any Philips lights in my home. I do have Zigbee smart lights. Would that work if I can connect that Philips module to the Homey Pro? Can I use that to control my lights?
In theory, I believe it should, but I've never actually tried it. Um, all the Hue devices now use Zigbee 3.0, which is fairly common amongst smart hubs and supported. And it is only a switch. Well, in fact, it's two switches if you use the second gang on it. I really ought to try that, but I haven't done so. So, no, I can't confirm it.
Okay. Yeah, maybe something to think about. Look, I assume it would work because, Homey has the Zigbee radio and you can add new devices just through the Zigbee protocol. So I would assume it
I
would
would
work.
kind of hope it would, but yeah, I haven't tried it.
All right, sure. All right, getting a little bit sidetracked here. Getting back to the point, David, someone that's new to thinking about smart lighting in their home, which path are you going to send them down? The wall solution or just the smart bulb solution?
I think it depends. Obviously, there's if you are capable and prepared to lift the switch off the wall and take a look and see what wires are there, you're halfway towards putting some kind of a smart device in the wall. And for ceiling lighting, I guess that's okay. It might be more appropriate for two-way switching situations. So if you've got things like a hall or stairs with switches at either end, switches that are doing that are usually called two-way. But when I talk about them being smart, I prefer to use the term multi-location because it's not actually any kind of electrical circuit. So same thing, but just a bit of a different terminology. But I would always start people with smart bulbs because people that rent can do it. There's no electrical work, and you get a lot of bang for your buck, as you know. You get color changing and voice control and all the rest of it. But I personally use a mixture.
Okay. All right. Did you get the pop-up on your side that our call is going to end in 10 minutes? This is, I guess this is one of the
No, I
perils of,
didn't.
this is one of the perils of trying new software on the fly.
It is.
I've just got a message pop up that our Zoom call is going to end in 10 minutes. I guess I have to upgrade next time. So let's plan to wrap it up in like 8 to 9 minutes, which I know is relatively
Okay.
short compared to our
Yeah.
previous calls. Where do you want to go next?
Well, I
And
wanted to. Sorry. I really wanted to dwell a bit on the choice of smart switch product between neutral and no neutral. I know it's a little bit in the area of wiring, but why the difference and what the advantages and disadvantages are. If we can touch on that, that would be good.
sure. So just real quick, tell me, I'm a lay person. What's the purpose of having a neutral? And yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Well, for conventional lighting, there's no purpose. It
on off,
literally
right?
is yeah, it's just an on off, and you'll find that the wires in the back of the switch don't go anywhere; they're just joined together. And it's just a question of how the electrician ran the cables in the first place. They will either wire from the supply to the fitting and from the fitting to the switch, or they can wire as an alternative from the supply to the switch to the fitting, and that's why you end up with a neutral in the switch back box. But having it opens up more possibilities. In particular, it's useful with smart dimmers, because if you've got a neutral as well as a live, it means that the module, the electronics is powered all the time, and that extends the dimming range, so it will dim lower and it will go to full brightness, whereas with no neutral types, that range gets compressed. And it improves LED bulb compatibility. There's a thing called minimum load requirement, which requires some sort of calculation, really, because typically these things need 5, 10, maybe even 20 watts of minimum power. And if you've got a single LED bulb, it's probably about 5 or 6 watts, so it may not work. But if you have a neutral available, you can use a smart dimmer that makes use of it, and then you've got control. So the takeaway from all of that is, if you're buying products, look for ones that can be used with or without neutral, because that way, if you do have an electrician come along and there is neutral, he can use it and you'll get better performance. If there's no neutral present, he can still use it in no neutral mode at a slightly compromised performance.
In your experience, how common is it to come across devices that are incompatible if like it either needs or can't work with neutral?
Um, it's more common than I think people talk about. Not all LED bulbs that are dimmable dim well, and if you use those bulbs with a no neutral dimmer, you can end up with very poor performance. And the complaint that you get is that, well, I've turned it to minimum and it's still half brightness, and that's really very irritating. If you've got a good bulb with a good dimmer, you should be able to dim down to under 5%. But as an aside here, it's to do with how the eye perceives brightness. The power might be half, but you see it as much brighter than half brightness. Because as the lights dim, your iris opens up and you see more light. So you have to dim really, really low in terms of power before the eye says, oh, yeah, that's actually quite nice dim. 10% dim, 10% power is perceived as like 20 to 30, maybe even more brightness, and that isn't very dim. So yeah, I would say if you're going to go the dimming route, ideally you want one that is working with neutral for the smart dimmer and good LED bulbs. And surprise, surprise, cheap no-name branded bulbs probably don't dim very well. So
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. You make about as the lights get dimmer, your perception of the light level actually changes as well. That's a good one. And any favorite brands that you want to particularly mention
Yeah,
here?
in my experience, uh, the big name brands are usually the best at dimming performance, and I have had good experience with Philips bulbs. I'm not talking about Hue. I'm just talking about regular LED bulbs. They tend to have the most advanced technology, and work well for most instances. But there are others. But yeah.
Okay. Look, I don't have any experience with Philips, but a couple of days ago, I watched a YouTube video by Paul Hibbett, Home Tech. Are you
Oh
familiar?
yes,
You familiar
yeah,
with
yeah, I know
his?
Paul.
He's fantastic. He's very funny, very entertaining. I watched a video the other day. He was talking about Homey actually. I thought, wow, this is great, so relevant at the moment. Anyway, he seems to not like Philips Hue. I have no idea why.
No, he has had a long-standing gripe against it because it's taken him a while to realize the truth of some of the things that we were talking about, that Wi-Fi smart bulbs are not the way forward. And so, he was anti-Zigbee, but he was particularly anti-Hue because it's very expensive. And you can buy a Wi-Fi bulb for a fraction of the price. And that's completely true. There's no getting away from the fact that Hue products are, premium products. But guess what? If you pay a premium price, you get a premium product. It tends to work well, stay working well, and trouble free, and zero support issue. No, that's extravagant. It's not zero support issue, but it is, well, it is supported, and uh, he still has that particular bee in his bonnet. I think that Hue is too expensive, and I can't say it isn't, but it is a premium product.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure if I'll get any Philips lights or not. I just found that video of his where he's talking about Homey is so entertaining, particularly the part where he mentioned dashboards are coming to when you open the app, they're going to be right there. I was watching that thinking, yes, yes, because
Yeah,
when I was playing around with dashboards, that was one of the things that was frustrating to me as well. I thought, why do I have to click so many times to get to this dash? Why can't it just be my home screen? Anyway, maybe that's something we'll be able to comment on in the future. Sounds like that's coming potentially soon.
yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Well, look, I'm really, really sorry that we've kind of hit this time limit here. That was unexpected. Like I said, that's one of the perils of trying a new software solution. But I hope, if nothing else, our audio is synchronized, so it's not as painful to watch and listen to as our last
Well, let's hope
conversation.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, how much of the ticket that you wanted to talk about today have we actually covered, and how much do you think we might have to come back to some other time?
We didn't talk about scene lighting versus zone lighting, and I really wanted to touch on that.
I'd like to talk
Um,
about it. I'd like to learn about it. Yeah, sounds
yeah,
good to me. I mean, this is a great opportunity for me because I get to sit here and just ask questions of an expert about my
yeah.
home, and this is like free consulting for me. So happy to continue the conversation some other time.
Okay. Well, I think there's a couple of things that we could revisit.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, in the minute or so we've got left, what are your plans for what day is it? Tuesday. What are your plans for the rest of the week? Anything exciting?
Nothing very exciting, I'm afraid. No, and staying warm for the most part.
Okay. Okay. Well, lovely to talk to you again, David. And
Yeah, good to
yeah, we'll
talk to you,
circle
Martin.
back at some point again soon, and we'll continue the conversation about smart lighting.
Yes, I look forward to that.
Alrighty. All right. I hope you enjoyed the conversation there with David Webster. Let me know what you think about the audio quality. Hopefully, it's in sync. I guess I'm going to find out soon enough. And let me know what you think about the picture quality as well, because we're recording using Zoom, but I think things are looking good. So that might be the solution that I probably should have been using all along. Also, as you can see, this conversation was kind of rushed towards the end, and looks like we're going to have to round off the conversation because there were a few items that were left open-ended. So I think I'll probably be speaking to David again at some point fairly soon. If you have any questions or any feedback that you'd like me to talk to David about, any questions you'd like me to ask David, feel free to let me know. You can reach me, as always, Marty at automatedhome.com, or you can leave a comment on YouTube or wherever you happen to be listening or watching this. And I'd love to hear from you. And if you've got any suggestions for anybody else that you think I should talk to, or any other topics that you'd like me to talk about, let me know and I'll do my best. Real quick before I let you go, I do have it's a very short, funny story. Well, it's something that just made me chuckle that I thought I might share with you today, in the spirit of trying to bring you a funny story whenever I can. So I'm shopping around at the moment looking for either blackout blinds or blackout curtains for a couple of the rooms here. And look, I'm not really sure if I'm going to pull the trigger on this in this particular home or not, because we're going to be moving at some point soonish. That's a whole nother story. But the point is, I'm looking for blackout curtains or blackout blinds. So I'm kind of shopping around and I'm talking to a few different local businesses, and they do these types of products. I get talking to one of them, and I give them the window dimensions, and I'm asking for the price and the options. And he comes back to me and says, okay, for window that size, it's pretty big. I can do blackout blinds, but it will have to be in 2 separate sets, side by side. And I replied to him and said, but if it's 2 sets of blinds, won't there be a gap in the middle where the sun can come through and the light can come through? So it's not really going to be blackout? And he said, yeah, that's right. I said, well, it's not really what I'm looking for. Blackout should be black, blackout, no gap, no sun, no light. Anyway, I found that quite amusing that somebody that's doing this for a living, this is their job, they made what I think is a pretty funny suggestion. So that's it, real quick one today. But I hope wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you have a great day. Smells like my dinner is ready, and I'll talk to you again sometime soon, probably where we left off this conversation with David.